My name is Cale Ashford, and for 3 years I lived as the hidden omega of the Winters brothers, Damon, Kieran, and Thorne, heirs to New York's most powerful political dynasty. On the surface, I was envied. Every night, black Mercedes lined the private drive of their penthouse on the Upper East Side. Inside, crystal chandeliers lit the marble halls where senators and CEOs toasted the Winters name. I was always there, silent, perfectly dressed, a decorative shadow at their side. Some called me lucky, others called me shameless, but none of them knew the truth. I wasn't free, I was kept. I told myself I could endure it, that as long as the Winters brothers' protection shielded me, the rumors, the whispers, the shame wouldn't matter. But then fate mocked me. One winter morning, under the harsh lights of a private clinic, the doctor's words shattered everything. Pregnant. I laughed at first. How could this be possible? I'd been on suppressants, but the test results burned in my hands, undeniable proof that my body had betrayed me. That night, 6 weeks ago, when my suppressants had failed, when all three of them had found me in the throes of an unexpected heat, when they'd locked us in their private quarters for 2 days, that night had consequences I never imagined. Inside me, their child was growing, a secret that could destroy us all. That night, while they entertained foreign diplomats with wine and laughter in the grand dining room, I stood alone on the penthouse balcony. Wind bit my face, cutting through the thin silk of my shirt. My hand pressed against the slight swell of my stomach that only I could detect. Fear wrapped around me tighter than the winter air. If they found out, what would they do? Would they protect me, or would they see me as a liability? Their family would never accept an Omega consort bearing the Winters heirs. Their political enemies would use it as ammunition to destroy everything they'd built. And worse, so much worse, the people who'd been sending me those messages for the past month would have exactly the leverage they needed. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and read the latest text for the 100th time. Leave them, or we'll expose what you are. The scandal will ruin them. Their enemies are waiting. Disappear, and we'll ensure their safety. Stay, and watch everything they've worked for burn. The number was untraceable. The threats were specific enough to be credible. They knew about my designation. They knew about the suppressants. They knew things that should have been impossible to know. Someone close to us was feeding them information. I had two choices: stay and risk destroying the Winters brothers' political future, or disappear and give them a chance to survive the storm that was coming. The decision should have been impossible. But when I thought about the child growing inside me, when I imagined their faces if their careers crumbled because of me, when I remembered how Damon had once told me his greatest fear was becoming a disappointment to his family, the choice became clear. I had to vanish. So I ran. I faked my death with the help of the only person I trusted, Dr. Elena Cross, the physician at the private clinic. She'd seen my panic, understood what it meant to be powerless in a world run by alphas who thought they owned everything. "Are you sure?" She'd asked me that final night, her hands trembling as she showed me the falsified death certificate. "Once you do this, there's no coming back. They'll mourn you. They'll think you're dead." "I know," I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. "But if I stay, they'll destroy them. I can't. I won't be the reason their world falls apart." The staged accident was simple. A car crash on a rainy night. My identification found at the scene. My body actually a John Doe from the morgue with similar build burned beyond recognition. Doctor. Cross had contacts who owed her favors. The paperwork was processed quietly. The cremation happened quickly. Within 3 days, Cale Ashford was officially dead. I watched the news coverage from a dingy hotel room in Queens, my hand pressed over my mouth to muffle my sobs as I saw their faces on the screen. Damon looked carved from stone, the eldest, always so controlled. Kieran's jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. Thorne stood slightly apart, his face blank but his eyes devastated. All three of them looked like men whose world had shattered. And I hated myself for putting that grief there. For 5 years, I lived quietly in a cramped apartment in the Bronx, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan where the Winters brothers' world existed. I worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a bakery, evening shifts doing remote data entry. I raised my son Asher in secret. He was small for his age, often sick, his immune system weak in ways that terrified me. The doctors said it was genetic, something about alpha-omega biology mixing in unpredictable ways. Without proper medical care, the kind I couldn't afford, his condition would only worsen. But he was mine, my reason to breathe, my justification for every choice I'd made. He had their eyes, all three of them, somehow, dark and intense even at 5 years old. He had Damon's serious expression, Kieran's quick smile, Thorne's quiet intensity. Looking at him was like looking at a mirror that reflected all three of the men I'd loved and left behind. I thought I'd escaped. I thought I could build a life outside their shadow, where my son could grow up free from the political machinations and dangerous games that defined the Winters family empire. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. It started with the fever. Asher had always been fragile, prone to respiratory infections that left him gasping for air, his small body racked with coughs that sounded like breaking glass. But this was different. This fever came on fast and vicious. One moment he was eating breakfast, complaining that his oatmeal was too hot. The next he was slumped against the table, his skin burning to the touch, his breathing shallow and rapid. I'd carried him to 3 different clinics. The first was closed. The second refused to see us without upfront payment I didn't have until my next paycheck. The third was so overcrowded that the nurse told me it would be a 4-hour wait. Asher didn't have 4 hours. I could feel it in my bones, in the omega instincts that screamed at me that my child was in danger. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran into the street and tried to flag down a taxi. Rain poured in silver sheets across the city that night. The kind of rain that turns New York streets into rivers, that makes the neon signs blur into watercolor paintings, that drowns out every sound except the desperate hammering in your chest. I ran through those flooded streets, clutching Asher to my chest, waving desperately at taxis that sped past without slowing. Water soaked through my shoes, my clothes, plastering my hair to my face. Asher's whimpers grew weaker with each passing minute, and panic clawed at my throat like a living thing. "Please," I sobbed at every passing car. "Please, someone help us." But New York doesn't stop for desperation. The city just keeps moving, indifferent to the suffering of one Omega and his dying child. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, headlights cut through the storm. A sleek black SUV, expensive, the kind that shouldn't be in this neighborhood, slowed down. Hope surged through me so violently I nearly fell. I staggered into the road, almost throwing myself in front of the vehicle, raising one hand while the other clutched Asher against my chest. "Please," I cried to the driver, my voice raw and breaking. "My son, he's sick. Take us to the hospital. I'll pay you anything. The driver's window stayed up. For a moment, I thought he would drive away like all the others. My vision blurred with tears and rain, and I was preparing to throw myself onto the hood if that's what it took. Then the rear window slid down with a smooth, expensive hum, and there they were. Damon, Kieran, and Thorne Winters, sitting in the back seat like kings surveying their kingdom. Damon in the middle, Kieran to his right, Thorne to his left. 3 sets of dark eyes that I'd loved and feared and mourned for 5 years. 3 men who should have believed I was dead. The world stopped. Damon's eyes locked with mine first, and I watched recognition dawn like a sunrise slow, then all at once devastating in its completeness. His face, usually so controlled, went slack with shock. Kieran leaned forward, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no sound came out. Thorne's hand shot out and gripped the door handle so hard his knuckles went white. "Cale," Damon whispered. "Just my name. Like a prayer or a curse." "Get in," Kieran said, his voice rough. "Now." I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Asher and flee back into the rain, back into obscurity, back into the safety of being dead. But Asher let out a small, pained whimper against my chest, and the decision was made. I climbed into the SUV. The door closed with a soft, final click that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. The interior smelled like them expensive cologne and coffee and something indefinably alpha that made my omega instincts stir despite the suppressants I'd taken that morning. I was wedged between Kieran and the opposite door. Asher clutched to my chest. Damon sat across from us, Thorne beside him. The partition between the front and back was up, giving us privacy from the driver. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Rain hammered against the windows like frantic fists, the city lights blurring into streaks of color outside. I clutched Asher close. whispering his name, willing him to hold on just a little longer. But the silence in the car was suffocating. Then Damon spoke, his voice deadly quiet. "You were supposed to be dead." My chest tightened. I couldn't look at him, couldn't face the betrayal and rage I knew would be burning in those eyes I'd once loved more than my own life. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Not now. Just take us to the hospital. He's burning up. Please." "Who is he?" Thorne asked. His voice was softer than Damon's, but no less intense. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Kieran's hand moved, and suddenly, I felt the cold press of metal against my temple. I turned slowly, and there it was. The barrel of a gun, held steady in his hand. His face was perfectly calm, almost serene, but his eyes were wild with emotion barely contained. "Whose child is that?" Kieran's voice was conversational, pleasant even, the tone he used when he was most dangerous. Terror froze my blood. My arms tightened instinctively around Asher, as if I could shield him with my body from the men who'd given him life. "He's mine," I said, and hated how my voice shook. "Just mine. Please. He needs a doctor. Don't lie to me." The gun pressed harder. "I can smell it on him. Alpha genetics, strong bloodline. Whose child is that?" Of course he could smell it. Even through the rain and fear sweat, even with Asher burning with fever, Kieran's senses were too sharp to miss the traces of alpha pheromones already developing in my son. "In our son?" "Yours," I whispered, and watched their entire world shatter. "All three of you." The gun didn't waver, but something in Kieran's eyes did. Some fundamental understanding cracked and reformed into a new, terrible shape. Damon made a sound low in his throat, not quite a growl, but close. "Ours. You're saying this child is ours." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "How old?" Thorne's voice was hoarse. 5 years. I watched the calculation happen in real time, saw the exact moment all three of them did the math. 5 years meant 6 years ago, meant the night I disappeared, meant the heat that had consumed all of us for 2 days straight, meant I'd been pregnant when I'd faked my death. "You knew," Damon said, his voice flat. "You knew you were carrying our child when you left." "I found out after," I said quickly. "I didn't know until..." "Liar." Kieran's hand trembled slightly, the gun still pressed to my temple. "You disappeared 6 weeks after that night. Pregnancy tests work at 4 weeks. You knew." He was right. I had known. For 2 weeks, I'd known and said nothing. "Lower the gun," Thorne said quietly. "You're scaring him." For a moment, I thought Kieran wouldn't comply. Then he slowly withdrew the weapon, tucking it back into his jacket, but his eyes never left my face. "Let me see him," Damon said. Not a request, a command. With trembling hands, I adjusted the blanket so they could see Asher's sleeping face, his dark hair that was already thick despite being only 5, his tiny nose, his perfect bow-shaped mouth, and his eyes, which opened at that moment dark and intense and unmistakably theirs. Asher looked at the 3 strangers crowding the car, his fevered gaze moving from face to face. Then he looked up at me, his small voice barely audible over the rain. "Papa? Who are they?" "Papa." The word hit them like a physical blow. I saw Damon's hands clench, saw Kieran's jaw tighten, saw Thorne's throat work as he swallowed hard. "Friends," I whispered to Asher, stroking his forehead. "They're helping us get to the hospital." "I don't feel good," Asher whimpered, and my heart cracked. "I know, baby. We're almost there." The SUV screeched to a stop outside a private hospital I recognized from my time with them, the kind where senators went for their private procedures, where no one asked questions. Medical staff rushed forward as the driver opened the door. I tried to follow as they took Asher from my arms, but Damon's hand clamped around my wrist like an iron shackle. "You go with him in a moment," Damon said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "First, you come with us." I was pulled into a private consultation room, while Asher was rushed to emergency care. The room was elegant leather chairs, mahogany desk, oil paintings that probably cost more than my annual salary. Damon stood in front of the closed door, blocking my exit. Kieran and Thorne flanked me on either side, creating a wall of alpha presence that made my omega instincts scream to submit. 5 years, Damon said softly, too softly, like the calm before a hurricane. 5 years, and we mourned you. Do you know what it felt like to hold an urn and wonder if we should scatter your ashes or keep them? I bit down hard on my lip, tasting blood. We thought you were dead, Kieran added, his voice rough with emotion. We went to your funeral. We watched them lower your coffin into the ground. We stood in the rain and said goodbye. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't know what else to do. You could have trusted us, Thorne said, his quiet voice somehow cutting deeper than the other's anger. You could have told us about the threats. Let us protect you. I was protecting you. They said they'd destroy your careers if I stayed. They knew about my designation, knew about the suppressants, knew everything. Who? Damon's voice cracked like a whip. Who threatened you? I don't know. The messages were untraceable. Tears streamed down my face now, but they were specific. They knew things no one should know. And they said if I didn't disappear, they'd leak everything, that your enemies were waiting for the scandal. Damon and Kieran exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. The Chen campaign, Thorne said quietly. It has to be. We'll deal with that later, Damon said, his eyes never leaving my face. Right now, we need to discuss the child. Asher, I corrected, some defiance breaking through my fear. His name is Asher. Asher, Damon repeated, testing the name. Our son, the child you've been raising alone for 5 years while we thought you were dead. What did you expect me to do? I shot back. Come back from the dead and say, surprise, I'm alive and pregnant with your baby? You would have locked me up, controlled every aspect of my life. We would have protected you, Kieran's voice rose. We would have eliminated the threat and kept you both safe. By making me a prisoner. That's what you did before, what you would have done again. My voice broke. I couldn't live like that, couldn't raise a child in a gilded cage. So, instead, you raised him in poverty? Damon said coldly. Look at him, Cale. He's malnourished, sick. His immune system is compromised because you couldn't afford proper medical care. Tell me again how you made the right choice. The words struck like daggers because they were true. Every doctor had said the same thing. Asher's condition was manageable with the right treatment, but that treatment was expensive. Treatment I couldn't afford on 2 jobs and no benefits. I did the best I could, I whispered. Your best almost killed him, Damon said. If we hadn't been driving through that neighborhood tonight. But you were. I looked up at him. Why were you there? That's not your usual route. The 3 of them exchanged another look. We were investigating a lead, Thorne said carefully. About your death. We never believed it was an accident. My blood ran cold. What? The crash scene was too perfect, Kieran said. Too convenient. We've had investigators working on it for 5 years. Tonight, we got a tip about someone who might have information. A doctor in Queens. Dr. Cross. They'd been tracking her. We were going to question her, Damon continued. Find out what she knew. And instead, we found you. A knock on the door interrupted us. A doctor entered, looking between the 4 of us with professional neutrality. Mr. Ashford? He said, looking at me. Your son is stable. We've started IV antibiotics and fluids. He has pneumonia, but we caught it early enough. He'll need to stay overnight for observation, but he should make a full recovery. Relief nearly knocked me over. Can I see him? Of course. He's been asking for you. I moved toward the door, but Damon's voice stopped me. This conversation isn't finished. My son needs me, I said, not looking back. We can talk later. We'll all go, Thorne said. It wasn't a suggestion. Asher was in a private room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital room, all warm colors and comfortable furniture, with a flat-screen TV and windows that looked out over the city. He was hooked up to monitors and IVs, but his color was already better, his breathing easier. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Papa! He reached for me with the hand that didn't have an IV. I went to him immediately, taking his hand and pressing a kiss to his forehead, breathing in his scent milk and soap and something uniquely him. Hey, baby, how are you feeling? Tired. The doctors gave me medicine through a tiny straw in my arm. He held up his hand to show me the IV. It didn't hurt much. They were really nice. I'm glad. I stroked his hair, unable to stop touching him now that he was safe. Are they still here? Asher's eyes moved to the three men who had followed me into the room, standing awkwardly near the door like they weren't sure they belonged. Yes, I said carefully, my heart hammering. They're helping us. Asher studied them with a child's uncomplicated curiosity, his gaze moving from face to face. You look the same. Like, exactly the same. Kieran blinked, glancing at his brothers. What? You look the same, like copies. Asher tilted his head in that way that was so reminiscent of Thorn it made my chest ache. Are you brothers? Triplets, Damon said, his voice softer than I'd heard it all night. He moved closer to the bed, slow and careful like he was approaching something precious and fragile. We're triplets. That means we were all born on the same day. Like in my book. Asher's face brightened despite his illness, his eyes going wide with excitement. Papa reads me a story about triplets who go on adventures together. They have magic powers and fight dragons. Does he? Thorn moved closer too, his expression gentle in a way that made something in my chest crack. What kind of adventures? And just like that, Asher started chattering about his favorite books, the stories I read him every night, the dragons and wizards and brave heroes. The fever and fear seemed to melt away as he got caught up in the telling, his little hands gesturing animatedly. I watched it happen in real time, watched Damon's stern expression soften as Asher described his favorite character. Watched Kieran smile, really smile, not the careful political smile, but something genuine when Asher made a joke about the silly wizard. Watched Thorn's eyes grow suspiciously bright when Asher mentioned that his favorite part was when the three brothers saved each other. Do you have adventures? Asher asked, looking at them with open curiosity. Like in the book? Sometimes, Kieran said, pulling up a chair and sitting down so he was at eye level with Asher. Though usually our adventures are more boring. Meetings and paperwork instead of dragons. That sounds really boring, Asher said seriously, and Kieran laughed. It is. Extremely boring. Papa's job is boring too, Asher confided. He works with papers and computers and talks to people on the phone, but he says it's important because he helps people who need help. Your papa is very good at helping people, Thorn said quietly. He's one of the best people I've ever known. I looked away, blinking back tears. Are you important? Asher asked, his child's mind making connections. You dress like the important people who come to Papa's office sometimes. All fancy. Some people think we're important, Damon said, but the most important thing is being here with you right now. Really? Asher's eyes went wide. More important than meetings? Much more important, Damon confirmed, and the weight of truth in his voice made my throat tight. A nurse came in to check Asher's vitals, taking his temperature and blood pressure while he chattered at her about his new friends. The triplets. He called them like they'd always been part of his life. After she left, Asher started yawning, his eyelids drooping. Papa, I'm sleepy, he mumbled. Then sleep, baby. I'll be right here. Promise? Promise. I stroked his forehead, smoothing back his dark hair. His eyes drifted toward the triplets. Will you be here too? The question was innocent, guileless, but it hit all three of them like a physical blow. I saw Damon's hands clench, saw Kieran swallow hard, saw Thorn's expression crack. If you want us to be, Thorn said gently. I do, Asher said, his voice getting quieter as sleep pulled at him. You're nice. And you look like heroes from my book. He was asleep within minutes, his breathing evening out, his small face peaceful. We all stood there for a long moment, watching him sleep. Then Kieran made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and turned away, his hand coming up to cover his face. He's perfect, he said, his voice thick. God, he's perfect. He looks like us, Damon said, still staring at Asher. Same nose, same chin, same... everything, Thorn finished. He looks like baby pictures of us. Did you? Damon turned to me. Did you ever doubt? That he was ours? No, I said quietly. I had him tested when he was a month old. The results showed genetic markers from all three of you. Triple alpha bonding during heat. It's rare, but it happens. Especially with identical siblings. Our son, Kieran whispered, staring at Asher like he couldn't quite believe he was real. We have a son. Why didn't you tell us? Damon's voice wasn't angry now, just broken. When you found out you were pregnant, why didn't you come back? We would have made me a prisoner? I couldn't help the bitter edge in my voice. Controlled every aspect of my life to protect me? Damon, you threatened to lock me in the penthouse when I wanted to go to the grocery store alone. How do you think you would have reacted to finding out I was pregnant with your child? Children, Thorne corrected quietly. All three of ours. That makes it even more complicated. Exactly, which is why I left. I couldn't, my voice broke. I couldn't raise a child in a cage, even a gilded one. The silence that followed was heavy with 5 years of grief and regret and words left unsaid. Finally, Damon spoke. We need to talk, but not here. Asher needs rest. I'm not leaving him. Thorne will stay, Kieran said, like it was already decided. He's the calmest of us, won't you? Thorne nodded immediately. Of course. I'll call if anything changes. I wanted to argue, wanted to stay with my son and not have this conversation, but the look on Damon's face said this wasn't negotiable. We moved to a private consultation room down the hall. As soon as the door closed, Damon turned on me. You're moving back in with us, both of you, tonight. Absolutely not. This isn't a discussion. He cut in. Asher needs proper medical care. You need protection from whoever threatened you 5 years ago. And we, his voice roughened, we need to know our son. You can visit him. We can arrange. No. Kieran stepped closer. You don't get to make these decisions alone anymore. He's ours too. He's been mine for 5 years. Because you stole him from us. Damon's composure finally cracked. You faked your death and took our child. Do you have any idea what that makes you? A father trying to protect his son. A thief, Damon's voice echoed off the walls. You stole 5 years we can never get back. 5 years of firsts, first words, first steps, first days of school. You stole all of that because you were afraid. I was protecting you. We didn't need protection, Kieran shouted. We needed you. We needed to know we had a son. We had a right to know. You had no rights. You think being alphas gives you ownership over everything? Over me? Over my body? Over my child? My voice rose to match theirs. I made a choice to survive, to give my son a chance at a life without being a political pawn in your family's games. And look how that turned out, Damon said coldly. He's malnourished. Sick. Living in poverty because you were too proud to ask for help. I didn't have a way to ask. I was dead, remember? That was the whole point. You could have come back at any time. And you would have done exactly this. I gestured at the room, at the situation. Taken control, made demands, treated me like property instead of a person with choices. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Thorne's voice came through the phone Kieran had forgotten he was holding. He's awake, asking for Kale. I moved toward the door, but Damon blocked my path. This conversation isn't over, he said quietly. But for now, go to him. We'll talk more in the morning. I'm not moving in with you. We'll see. The way he said it, so calm, so certain, sent chills down my spine. Over the next 3 days, while Asher recovered in the hospital, the Winters brothers were constant presences. They took turns staying with him, bringing him toys and books, reading to him, making him laugh. And slowly, I watched my son fall in love with the fathers he'd never known. Damon taught me a card game. Asher announced on the second day, his eyes bright with excitement. And Kieran said he'd take me to see a real baseball game when I'm better. And Thorne knows everything about dinosaurs. My heart clenched. That's great, baby. They're nice, Asher said seriously. I wish they could be my daddies for real. The words were an arrow through my chest. On the third day, Dr. Cross visited. She looked tired and worried, her eyes darting to the Winters brothers who had coincidentally been in the room when she arrived. Kale, she said carefully, can we talk privately? Anything you need to say to him, you can say in front of us, Damon said. His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were steel. Dr. Cross paled. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you were okay. He's fine, Kieran said. Though we'd love to hear about how you helped him fake his death. Very thoroughly, with details. I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Elena Cross, Thorne said, reading from his phone. License number 847392. Works at the Riverside Clinic in Queens. Has a daughter, Sarah, age 7. Currently in the custody of your ex-husband due to financial difficulties. The threat was implicit but clear. Please, Dr. Cross whispered. I was just trying to help. He was terrified. Said people were threatening him, that if he didn't disappear, someone would get hurt. Who told him to disappear? Damon's voice was quiet. Dangerous. I don't know, he never said. Just that he'd received messages, threats, that he had to protect. She glanced at them. Protect the people he loved. Did you help anyone else? Kieran asked. Was there anyone else involved? Dr. Cross shook her head. Just me. I falsified the death certificate, arranged for the body. I thought I was helping someone escape an abusive situation. I didn't know. Her voice broke. I didn't know about the child. About you. I'm sorry. Damon studied her for a long moment, then he nodded once. You'll receive a call from our lawyers. They'll be setting up a trust fund for your daughter's education. In exchange, you'll sign an NDA about all of this. Agreed? Dr. Cross's eyes widened. Yes. Thank you. After she left, I turned to Damon. You didn't have to do that. She helped you when you needed it, he said simply. That deserves recognition, even if I hate what she helped you do. The sentiment was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. When Asher was finally cleared to leave the hospital, a car was waiting. Not just any car, their car. The same black SUV from that rainy night. We're going home, Damon said. My apartment. Has already been cleared out? Kieran interrupted. Your belongings are being moved to our penthouse as we speak. You can't just... We can, and we did. Damon's tone left no room for argument. Asher needs proper medical care. You need protection. This is happening. I wanted to fight, to argue, to tell them they couldn't control my life. But Asher chose that moment to grab Kieran's hand. Are we going to your house? The big one you told me about? Yes, Kieran said, his voice softening. With the game room, and the library, and the rooftop garden. Really? Asher's eyes went huge. Papa, can we, please? Looking at my son's hopeful face, at the first real excitement I'd seen from him in months, I couldn't say no. Okay, I whispered. We can try it. Not try, Damon corrected. Stay. Permanently. The penthouse looked exactly as I remembered it. Same marble floors, same crystal chandeliers, same floor-to-ceiling windows with views of Central Park. But there were changes, too. A bedroom had been converted into a child's room, decorated in blues and greens, with a bed shaped like a race car and shelves full of books and toys. This is mine? Asher breathed, walking into the room with wonder. All yours, Thorne said. We can change anything you don't like. I love it. Asher ran to the bed, climbing up and bouncing. Papa, look! It's a car! I stood in the doorway, watching my son experience joy I'd never been able to give him, and felt like the worst father in the world. Your room is next door, Damon said quietly beside me. Connected by a bathroom so you can hear if he needs you. I don't need a room. I can sleep with Asher. You need rest. Actual rest. You look like you haven't slept properly in 5 years. He wasn't wrong, but the thought of sleeping in their house, of accepting their help, felt like surrendering. That night, after Asher was asleep in his race car bed, the three of them cornered me in the living room. We need to discuss the situation, Damon said, settling into his usual armchair while Kieran and Thorne took the couch. Specifically, your role here. I'm Asher's father, I said, perching on the edge of a chair. That's my role. You're also our... Kieran paused, seeming to struggle with the word. You were our partner. Before. I was your kept omega, I corrected bitterly. There's a difference. Is that how you saw it? Thorne asked quietly. As being kept? How else should I have seen it? You controlled where I went, who I saw, what I did. You made all the decisions. I gestured vaguely. There. That's not how we saw it, Damon said. We thought we were protecting you. From what? From our world. From the people who would have used you to get to us. He leaned forward. Did you never wonder why we kept you hidden? It wasn't shame. It was fear. Fear that our enemies would see you as a weakness to exploit. Like the people who sent those messages, Thorne added, who did exactly that. I hadn't thought of it that way. Had spent 5 years believing they'd been ashamed of having an Omega, that I'd been a dirty secret to hide. We loved you, Kieran said, his voice rough. We weren't good at showing it. We're alphas from a political family. We were raised to be controlled, strategic, never vulnerable, but we loved you. And when we thought you died, his voice broke. It nearly destroyed us. You seemed fine on the news, I said quietly. At the funeral, you looked. Like we'd been trained to look, Damon finished. Composed, in control. We fell apart in private. Kieran didn't leave his room for a month. Thorne threw himself into work 18 hours a day. He paused. I held your urn every night and talked to it like you could hear me. Tears burned my eyes. I didn't know. Because we didn't let you know. We didn't let anyone know. Thorne's hand clenched on his knee. That's on us. We should have shown you how much you mattered before it was too late. And now? I asked. What is this? What do you want from me? We want our family back, Damon said simply. You, Asher, the life we could have had if you hadn't been forced to run. And if I say no, then we'll respect that. Thorne said, surprising me. We'll set up shared custody of Asher. Make sure you both have everything you need, but we won't force you to be with us. Liar, Kieran muttered. We'd absolutely try to convince you. Try, yes, Thorne agreed with a small smile. Force, no. There's a difference. I looked at each of them in turn. Damon with his controlled exterior hiding deep emotion. Kieran with his impulsive passion barely contained. Thorne with his quiet intensity that saw everything. The men I'd loved, the men I'd left, the fathers of my son. I need time, I said finally. I need to figure out who I am outside of being your Omega or Asher's father. I need time, Damon finished. You'll have it, but you'll have it here, where we can keep you both safe. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Asher thrived with proper medical care and nutrition. His color improved, his energy increased, his coughs disappeared. The pediatrician they'd hired, Dr. Morrison, one of the best in New York, marveled at his recovery. Whatever you were doing before wasn't working, she told me bluntly during a follow-up appointment. His immune system was severely compromised. Another few months, and we would have been looking at serious, permanent damage. The words were a knife to my chest. Another reminder that my choices, made with the best intentions, had nearly cost my son his health. But now Asher had everything. A room filled with toys he'd never dreamed of, clothes that actually fit instead of hand-me-downs from donation bins. Food, so much food, all healthy and organic and prepared by their private chef who'd been instructed to cater to a growing child's needs. And more than that, he had fathers, 3 of them, each devoted in their own way. Damon was the structured one. He created schedules, mealtimes, bedtimes, educational activities. He hired a tutor to help Asher catch up academically, since his previous schools had been underfunded and overcrowded. Every evening, Damon would sit with him and review what he'd learned, patient and encouraging even when Asher struggled. You're doing great, Damon would say, his usually stern face softening when he looked at our son. Try it again. Take your time. Kieran was the playful one. He came home with new toys and games constantly, transforming the penthouse into a wonderland. He taught Asher card games and video games and how to throw a baseball. On weekends, he'd take him to Central Park or the zoo or the Natural History Museum, returning with stories and laughter. Daddy, Kieran let me touch a snake, Asher would announce, his eyes huge with excitement. Did he now? I'd say, shooting Kieran a look. It was educational, Kieran would defend, grinning, and supervised by professionals. Thorne was the gentle one. He read to Asher every night chapter books about adventures and magic and faraway places. He helped him with science projects and answered his endless questions about how things worked. He was the one Asher went to when he had nightmares, the one who could soothe him back to sleep with quiet words. Why did Papa think you were mean? Asher asked Thorne one night. I was passing by the door and froze, listening. Because I didn't show him I cared, Thorne said honestly. I thought keeping him safe was enough. But people need to feel loved, not just protected. I learned that lesson too late. But you love him now, right? Very much, and I love you too. I love you too, Daddy Thorne. I'd fled to my room and cried. My own adjustment was harder. I was used to working, to having purpose beyond childcare. Sitting in the penthouse all day while Asher was with his tutor felt wrong, like I was accepting charity instead of being a partner. I want to work, I told Damon one morning over breakfast. He looked up from his tablet. Doing what? I don't know. Anything. I have a degree in social work. That you never got to use, Kieran interrupted, joining us with coffee. Because you were working survival jobs to pay rent. Exactly. So let me use it now. There must be some organization that needs help. Our family foundation, Thorne said, appearing from his office. We fund social programs across the city. They're always understaffed. I blinked. You have a foundation? Our mother started it before she died, Damon said. We've maintained it, but none of us have the time to run it properly. If you're interested. I am, I said immediately. They set me up with an office small but professional and introduced me to the foundation's current director, an older woman named Margaret, who looked both relieved and skeptical when she learned I'd be helping. You're not just here because you're sleeping with the bosses, are you? She asked bluntly. No, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm here because I spent 5 years in the system I want to help fix. I know what it's like to need resources that don't exist, to fall through the cracks. I want to do better for people like me. She'd studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. We need people who understand. Let me show you what we're working with. The foundation was a mess, well-funded but poorly organized, with grants going to programs that didn't need them while critical services went unfunded. I threw myself into fixing it, reorganizing priorities, researching outcomes, building relationships with community organizations. It gave me purpose. Identity beyond Omega, or Asher's father. I was good at this work, and it felt amazing to be good at something again. But living with the Winters brothers was still complicated. We were dancing around each other, trying to figure out what we were to each other now. Not what we'd been, but not quite moving forward either. The tension came to a head one night when Damon mentioned casually that they'd hired additional security. Why? I asked, immediately on alert. Precaution, he said, not looking up from his laptop. Precaution against what? Kale. No, I stood, anger flaring. You don't get to make security decisions about me without asking. I'm not your property. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Because it feels like you're trying to control me again, like before. Someone sent those messages 5 years ago, Kieran said, entering the room. We still don't know who. They could come back. So you decided to increase security without telling me? Without asking if I felt unsafe? Without including me in the decision? My voice rose. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You making choices about my life like I don't get a say? We're trying to protect you, Damon's composure cracked. Is that so terrible? When you do it without my consent? Yes. You're treating me like I'm fragile, like I can't handle knowing about threats or making decisions about my own safety. You faked your death instead of coming to us for help, Thorne said quietly. Forgive us for being concerned about your decision-making. The words were like a slap. I stared at him, feeling betrayed. That's not fair, isn't it? You made a massive choice 5 years ago without consulting us. Now we're making security choices without consulting you. How is that different? Because I was trying to survive. You're trying to control. We're trying to keep you alive, Kieran shouted. Do you have any idea what it was like thinking you were dead? I couldn't breathe for months. I couldn't function. And now you're back and all I can think about is losing you again. So yes, we hired extra security, and we're not sorry. Silence fell. We stood there, all of us breathing hard, years of hurt and fear and love spilling out in ugly ways. I can't do this, I said finally. I can't live like this. Waiting for you to decide my life isn't mine. I walked out, grabbing my jacket and heading for the door. Where are you going? Damon demanded. For a walk, alone. Am I allowed to do that, or do I need permission? I didn't wait for an answer. I took the elevator down and walked out into the New York night, needing air, needing space, needing to think. I made it 2 blocks before I realized I was being followed. Not by their security, I recognized those guys. By someone else. Someone who'd been watching me since I left the building. Fear spiked. I quickened my pace, pulling out my phone to call. Who? The Winters brothers? The very people I just stormed away from? But before I could decide, a hand clamped over my mouth, and I was being dragged into an alley. I fought, kicking and clawing, but my attacker was strong, alpha strong. He slammed me against the wall, his hands still covering my mouth. K.L. Ashford, he said, his voice cold. Back from the dead. Interesting. I didn't recognize him, didn't know his face or his scent. Someone paid me very well 5 years ago to make sure you stayed gone, he continued. And now you're back, living with the Winters boys like nothing happened. That's a problem. He pulled out a knife. So, I'm going to finish what should have been finished 5 years ago. Terror flooded me. I was going to die. Really die this time, not fake. I'd never see Asher again. Never tell the Winters brothers I loved them. Never. Suddenly, my attacker was gone, yanked away by invisible hands. I heard the sound of fists hitting flesh, of grunts and curses. Then Kieran was there, standing over the attacker's unconscious body, his knuckles bloody. Are you okay? He demanded, his eyes wild with fear and adrenaline. Did he hurt you? I couldn't speak, could only shake my head. Damon and Thorne appeared, flanked by their security team. Damon took one look at the situation and barked orders. Get him. I want to know who hired him, and I want to know everything about the original threats. Then he turned to me, and his controlled exterior crumbled. You could have died. You walked out and you could have died. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry. I just needed space. We don't need space. Kieran pulled me into his arms. We need you safe. We need you alive. I don't care if you're angry at us. I don't care if you hate us, as long as you're breathing. I don't hate you, I said, tears streaming down my face. I love you, all of you. I'm just scared of losing myself again. Then we'll figure it out, Thorne said, his hand on my back. Together, with communication instead of assumptions. But you have to trust us enough to stay, even when it's hard. And I'm trying, I whispered. I'm trying. They took me home, let me check on Asher, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the danger. Then we all sat down in the living room and actually talked. About boundaries, about fears, about what we needed from each other. I need to feel like I have agency, I said, like my opinions matter, like I'm part of the decision-making process, not just being informed of decisions after they're made. We can do that, Damon agreed, but you need to understand our perspective too. For 5 years, we thought you were dead. We blamed ourselves, wondered what we'd done wrong. And now you're back and all we can think about is protecting you from everything. You can't protect me from everything, I said gently. Bad things happen, threats exist. But wrapping me in bubble wrap isn't the answer. Including me is. What about compromise? Thorne suggested. We discussed security measures before implementing them. You agree not to walk out alone at night without letting us know where you're going. That's reasonable, I admitted. I shouldn't have just left. And we should have asked before hiring more security, Kieran added. This goes both ways. It was a start, not perfect, but honest. Over the following weeks, we practiced. They involved me in decisions. I communicated instead of running. Slowly, trust rebuilt. And with trust came intimacy. Not just physical, though, there was that too. All three of them taking turns showing me how much they'd missed me, but emotional. Late-night conversations. Shared jokes. Comfortable silences. I learned that Damon loved old movies, but was embarrassed to admit it. That Kieran wrote poetry he never showed anyone. That Thorne played piano beautifully, but only when he thought no one was listening. They learned that I was terrified of thunderstorms, that I'd always wanted to learn to cook properly, that I'd never been to the ocean despite growing up in New York. We'll take you, Kieran said immediately. This summer. We'll rent a house in the Hamptons, all of us. With Asher? I asked. Of course, with Asher. He needs to see the ocean, too. The thought of a family vacation, of being together without fear or secrecy, made my chest ache with longing. I'd like that, I whispered. 2 months after I'd moved back in, the man who'd attacked me finally talked. Under pressure from investigators and probably some less legal persuasion from the Winters brothers' contacts, he revealed who'd hired him. Senator Chen, the same one whose campaign Thorne had mentioned the night of the reunion. He was running against our father for a congressional seat 6 years ago, Damon explained. He found out about you somehow. hired people to investigate, to find leverage. And when they discovered I was Omega, unbonded, and living with you, I felt sick. He orchestrated the threats, Thorne continued. Made you feel unsafe so you'd run. Knew that losing you would destabilize us emotionally and politically. And it worked, Kieran said bitterly. We were a mess after you died. Father's campaign suffered. Chen won. Is he still in office? I asked. For now. Damon's smile was sharp. But we have evidence of his involvement in your fake death, in the attempted murder 2 months ago. He's finished. Will it be a scandal? Absolutely. But we're prepared for it. And this time, he took my hand. We're not hiding you. We're claiming you publicly. Let the world see exactly what he tried to destroy. The press conference was terrifying. Cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions, but I stood between Damon and Kieran, with Thorne at my back, and told the truth. About being Omega, about the threats, about faking my death to protect them, about Asher, growing up without his fathers because of Senator Chen's manipulations. The public reaction was mixed. Some condemned us and Omega living with 3 alphas, raising a child with all of them, but more supported us. Especially when the evidence of Chen's crimes came out, when people realized I'd been driven away by political machinations. Chen resigned in disgrace. His career was over, and we were free. 3 months later, on Asher's 6th birthday, they threw him a party. Not the massive, political affair I'd feared, but something small and personal, just Asher's school friends from the private academy he now attended, and a few trusted family members. I watched Asher blow out his candles surrounded by his fathers, laughing and happy and healthy in ways that made my heart ache with gratitude. He'd gained weight, his cheeks filling out, his eyes bright and clear. The cough that had plagued him for years was gone. He ran and played without gasping for breath. This was what I'd wanted for him all along. And it had taken losing my pride, my independence, my carefully guarded walls to give it to him. Make a wish, Kieran encouraged, his hand on Asher's shoulder. Asher closed his eyes tight, his face scrunching with concentration, then blew out all 6 candles in one breath. His friends cheered, and he grinned with pride. What did you wish for? One of his friends asked. Can't tell, Asher said seriously. It won't come true if I tell. But he looked at me, then at his 3 fathers, and something in his expression said he'd wished for exactly what he already had. That night, after Asher was asleep and the guests had left and the caterers had cleaned up, I found all 3 of them in the study Damon's domain. All dark wood and leather and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. They looked up from whatever documents they'd been reviewing, their expressions shifting to concern when they saw me in the doorway. Can we talk? I asked, my heart hammering. Of course, Damon said immediately, setting aside his papers. Is everything all right? Is Asher? Asher's fine. Perfect, actually. I took a breath, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. I want to talk about us. The air seemed to shift, all 3 of them going very still. All right, Thorne said carefully. What about us? I'd rehearsed this in my head 100 times, planned what I'd say, how I'd say it. But now, standing here with all 3 of them watching me with those dark, intense eyes, all my practiced words fled. I want to accept the bond, I said finally, the words coming out in a rush. If you still want me, if the offer still stands. The silence was deafening. Then Kieran was on his feet, crossing to me in 3 strides. Are you sure? I'm terrified, I admitted, looking up at him. But I'm also tired of running from the only people I've ever loved. Tired of pretending this isn't what I want, so yes, I'm sure. What changed? Damon asked, still seated but leaning forward, his gaze intense. 3 months ago, you could barely stand to be in the same room with us for more than an hour. You changed, I said quietly. Or maybe I finally let myself see what was already there, the way you include me in decisions now instead of making them for me. The way you listen when I say I need space. The way you love Asher not as a possession but as a person. I moved further into the room, looking at each of them in turn. Damon, you created a schedule that gives me time to work, and time with Asher, and time for myself. You ask my opinion on security measures instead of just implementing them. You make me feel like a partner instead of someone to be protected from the world. Damon's expression softened, something vulnerable showing through his usual control. Kieran, you make me laugh. You remind me that life isn't all responsibility and fear. You've shown Asher what joy looks like, what it means to be spontaneous and playful, and you've shown me that it's okay to have fun, to let my guard down. Kieran's eyes were suspiciously bright. Thorn, you see me, really see me. You notice when I'm tired or stressed or overwhelmed, and you just quietly make things easier. You don't demand attention or affection, you just offer support, and that means everything. Thorn stood, moving toward me with that quiet intensity that had always drawn me to him. I'm still scared, I continued, my voice shaking slightly. Scared of losing myself, scared of becoming just the Omega again. But I'm more scared of living the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if I'd just been brave enough to try. You're the bravest person I know, Damon said, standing as well. You survived 5 years alone with a sick child. You walked away from the life we offered because you thought it would destroy you. That's not cowardice, that's strength. Then let me be strong enough to stay, I whispered. Let me be strong enough to choose this. Choose you. All of you. What followed was tender and intense, and nothing like the desperate heat-driven encounter of 6 years ago. They didn't rush, didn't overwhelm me with 3 sets of hands all at once. Instead, Kieran kissed me first soft and sweet, and asking permission with every touch. When I melted into him, when I opened my mouth and let him in, Damon came up behind me, his hands gentle on my hips. We can stop any time, Damon murmured against my ear. This is your choice, your pace. I don't want to stop, I said, reaching back to pull him closer. Thorn was the last, waiting until I reached for him, until I pulled him into the circle of us. His kiss was different, deeper, searching, like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. They undressed me slowly, reverently, like they were unwrapping something precious. And they let me undress them too, gave me control, let me set the pace, let me explore the bodies I'd tried so hard to forget. Damon was all controlled power, muscles honed by early morning runs and disciplined workouts. Kieran was leaner but no less strong, his body a study in elegant strength. Thorn was somewhere between them, solid and steady and warm. You're beautiful, Kieran whispered, his hands mapping my sides, my hips, my thighs. You've always been beautiful. Even now? I asked, self-conscious about the changes pregnancy and 5 years of hard living had left on my body. Even with the stretch marks? And especially now, Damon interrupted, his fingers tracing the silver lines across my abdomen. These are proof of what you survived, what you sacrificed. They're beautiful. They took me to Damon's bedroom, the largest of the 3, with a bed big enough for all of us. And there, in the quiet privacy of that space, they showed me what I'd been missing. Kieran's mouth on my neck, finding the sensitive spots that made me gasp. Damon's hands clever and knowing, remembering exactly how I like to be touched. Thorn's quiet words of praise and encouragement, telling me how much they'd missed this, missed me. When I was boneless and begging, when I was absolutely certain I was ready, Damon positioned himself and slowly, carefully joined our bodies. The stretch and burn and fullness were familiar and foreign all at once. It had been 6 years since I'd done this, since I'd let anyone this close. Okay? He asked, his voice strained with the effort of holding still. Yes, I breathed. God, yes. He moved then, slow and deep, and I lost myself in the rhythm. But before I could get close to the edge, he pulled out, and Kieran took his place, his movements faster, more playful, punctuated with kisses and whispered words that made me laugh even as I moaned. Then Thorn, whose careful intensity matched his personality, every thrust deliberate, every angle calculated to make me feel good. It was overwhelming and perfect, and exactly what I needed. When I was shaking, when I was so close I could barely breathe, Damon leaned down and whispered, "Are you ready?" I knew what he was asking. The bond, the permanent claim, the bite that would tie us together for life. Yes, I whispered. All 3 of you. I want all 3 of you. Damon moved first, his teeth finding the bonding gland at my neck, the spot that every Omega had, sensitive and waiting. The bite was sharp and bright and perfect, and I felt it immediately, a thread spinning out from my chest, winding its way to his. Through the bond, I felt his emotions flood into me, his fierce protectiveness, his determination to never let me feel unsafe again, his deep, abiding love that he'd been too afraid to voice, his regret for the years we'd lost, his hope for the future we could build. Kieran was next, his bite on the other side of my neck, creating a second thread that braided with the first. Through his bond, I felt his joy pure and effervescent and all-consuming. His playfulness that masked deeper fears, his determination to make me laugh every day for the rest of our lives, his love for Asher that rivaled his love for me, his gratitude that I'd come back, that I'd given him a second chance. Thorn's bite was last, on the back of my neck where it met my shoulder, and his thread wrapped around the other two like a stabilizing force. Through his bond, I felt his quiet intensity, his analytical mind that was always 3 steps ahead, his devotion that ran bone deep, his promise to cherish every moment, every word, every touch, his love that didn't demand or take but simply offered itself completely. And they felt me too. Felt my love for Asher that eclipsed everything else. Felt my lingering fear of losing control, of being consumed by their needs and wants. Felt my hope that we could make this work, that we could be partners instead of Alpha and Omega. Felt my growing trust, fragile but real. When it was done, when we were bonded, truly, permanently bonded, I collapsed between them, trembling and overwhelmed and complete in ways I'd never imagined. "I've got you," Damon murmured, pulling me close. "We've got you. Always," Kieran added, his arm draping over both of us. "Forever," Thorn finished, his hand finding mine and linking our fingers together. I fell asleep like that, surrounded by my mates, our bonds humming contentedly, our hearts beating in sync. The next morning I woke to find them already awake, all 3 watching me with expressions of such tenderness it made my chest ache. "Morning," I mumbled, suddenly shy. "Good morning, mate," Damon said, the word carrying weight and meaning it never had before. Through the bonds I felt their contentment, their satisfaction, their love. "No regrets?" Thorn asked quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. I searched inside myself, looking for doubt or fear or second thoughts, found only peace. "No regrets," I said, and meant it. We heard Asher's voice from the hallway calling for me, probably wondering where I was. In the past, I would have bolted, anxious about him seeing me in bed with his fathers. But this morning, I just smiled. He's going to have questions. "Let him ask," Kieran said. "We'll answer honestly. He's old enough to understand that his papa loves his fathers, and his fathers love his papa." "All 3 of you?" "All 3 of us," Damon confirmed. "If that's what you want." I looked at each of them, at the men who'd given me a child, who'd let me run when I was afraid, who'd welcomed me back despite the pain I'd caused, who'd proven day after day that they could be trusted. "It's what I want," I said softly. The door burst open and Asher appeared, already dressed and bouncing with energy. "Papa, you're in Daddy Damon's room. Were you having a sleepover?" "Something like that," I said, sitting up and pulling the sheet around myself. "Come here, baby. We need to talk about something." Asher climbed onto the bed, settling between me and Kieran. "What?" "Your papa has accepted our bond," Damon said carefully. "Do you know what that means?" Asher tilted his head, thinking. "Like in my books, when the heroes bond and become a family?" "Exactly like that," Kieran said with a smile. "We're a family now. Officially." "We weren't a family before?" "We were," I said quickly. "But now it's permanent. Forever." "Good," Asher said simply. "I like forever." He looked at the 3 of them, then at me. "Does this mean you're not sad anymore, Papa?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "You used to be sad. A lot. When we lived in the old apartment and you worked all the time. But now you smile more. I like when you smile." Tears pricked my eyes. I thought I'd hidden it so well, my exhaustion and fear and loneliness, but children saw more than we gave them credit for. "I'm not sad anymore," I said, pulling him into a hug. "I'm happy. Very happy. Because you love my daddies?" "Yes, and because I have you. And because we're all together. Like the triplets in my book," Asher said contentedly. "They're always stronger together than apart." "Exactly like that," Thorne said, his voice thick with emotion. We spent the rest of the morning in bed, all five of us piled together, Asher chattering about his party and his gifts, while his fathers listened with rapt attention. Through the bonds, I felt their love for him, their awe at this child we'd created together. And I felt something else, too, something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Safe, protected, cherished, home. I wasn't the hidden Omega anymore, wasn't the kept secret or the shameful truth. I was their mate, their partner, their equal. And for the first time since I'd faked my death 5 years ago, I could breathe without fear. The next morning, I woke to find them already gone from the bed. Panic seized me for a moment. Was it a dream? Then I felt it. 3 distinct threads connecting me to them, warm and alive. The bonds were real. I found them in Asher's room, all 3 crowded around his bed while he showed them a drawing he'd made. "Look, Papa," Asher called when he saw me. "I drew our family." The picture showed 6 stick figures holding hands, 3 tall ones, 1 medium one, and 2 small ones. "Who's the extra person?" I asked, moving closer. "My baby brother," Asher said happily. "Daddy Damon said maybe I'll get a baby brother or sister someday, so I drew one just in case." My eyes shot to Damon, who had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "We were just talking hypothetically," he said. "Uh-huh." But I was smiling. "One thing at a time." "Agreed," Kieran said, slipping an arm around my waist. "First we master being a family of 5. Then we can discuss expanding." "I want a sister and a brother," Asher announced. "Like 3 siblings, like my daddies have each other." "We'll see," I said, laughing at their identical expressions of hope. It wasn't perfect. We still had moments of conflict, still struggled with boundaries and old fears, still had to work on communication and trust. But we were trying. Together. And for the first time in 5 years, I could breathe without fear. I was home. Thank you for joining Cale Ashford's journey from hidden Omega to claimed mate. If this story of faking a death, raising a son in secret, and finding the courage to come home to 3 alpha brothers touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more BL Omegaverse stories. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Was it the reunion in the rain, the hospital discovery, or the final bonding? Until next time, remember, sometimes the love we run from is the only love worth fighting for.